Now to explore some stress points of the model. The claim to unify multiple domains like physics, cosmology, and consciousness deserves skepticism. So, if that's how you feel, that is an understandable default reaction. This video isn't about extending the idea or exploring where it might lead or what it might answer. It's just to see where the model could be put under pressure. We need to ask how it could fail on specifics, because if no failures are even possible in principle, then the model's unfalsifiable and therefore useless. One of the central claims is that some features of reality are governed by global constraints rather than bottom-up causal chains. This is admittedly significantly different from how explanations are usually framed. If every apparent global effect can always be reduced to local interactions with no loss of explanatory power, then global constraints would just be different vocabulary, not really a feature. Any idea that can't do explanatory work on its own doesn't belong in the model. Another point we can press on is the claim that certain qualitative states, especially conscious experience, appear immediately once the relevant self-referential constraints are satisfied. It's not being built up slowly over time. If all qualitative states turn out to be nothing more than gradual accumulations, with no threshold behavior, no abrupt onset, and no principled discontinuities, then this part of the idea fails. If that part fails, the analogy to chords or phase transitions or symmetry doesn't make sense, because structure would just be poetic. Another pressure point of the framework is that it only survives if the same underlying logic can be applied across physics, cosmology, and cognition without changing the rules. If the reasoning has to shift depending on the domain, if metaphors replace structure, if ad hoc assumptions are introduced to protect the idea, then the apparent unity would be artificial. A model that unifies by altering isn't really unified. It's just committing to nothing. Also, in this framework, dark matter and dark energy are treated as global consistency effects rather than undiscovered particles. I admit that that is a risky claim, because if either dark physics is ultimately shown to be entirely particle-based with no need for global constraint explanations, then this part of the model is just wrong. There's no escaping that. Either the structure earns its place as part of the explanation, or it doesn't. There's also a real risk of pattern bias. Unifying ideas can feel compelling because they reveal patterns that look elegant. This model doesn't appeal to the beauty of patterns, it appeals to explanatory necessity. If the structure turns out to be optional, or if equally coherent explanations exist that don't require global constraints, then the model fails. Elegance is not a form of evidence. Related to that, this is not meant to be a theory that explains literally everything. The strength of the model should be that it restricts explanations, in the sense that it rules out entire classes of other stories that otherwise sound reasonable. If it was just merely another way to reinterpret any outcome after the fact, then it adds no constraints and no actual insights. If it's an interpretation without restriction, it is not a good explanation. So these are some examples of hypothetical weaknesses. They're not side issues. These are key points of the entire framework. If the model can't survive investigative pressure, if it fractures into separate explanations, if it overreaches, if it dissolves into interpretation, then it should be considered at best in need of some fundamental revisions. Those are some of the stress points I see. I'm sure there are other people more clever than myself that could think of more as well. In the next videos, we'll be exploring each of the domains themselves. First, we're going to focus on the instant nature of consciousness. We're going to look at what it really means for qualitative states to appear immediately where their constraints are satisfied. After that, we'll turn to the nature of time and how it emerges from constraint resolution rather than existing in some kind of container or as a container for events. The hope of investigating each domain individually is that we can see exactly how the model behaves under each and test the model's claims on more tangible grounds. By looking into concrete examples, perhaps this structure of reality can reveal some otherwise seemingly impossible insights for us.